Happy New Year. It's the Rocket Noob. Here we talk about building and flying model rockets and high power rockets. And I just want to make sure that I am actually live. It looks like I am. Raising money for the kiddos' rockets. Great idea. Just got a comment in the live stream. How are we doing? Yeah, we are about to design a model rocket here. So my son's grade school, elementary school, the PTO has an annual fundraising auction to raise money, and parents put up things like wine tasting parties or tickets to events, or maybe they give classes. Um, Anything of value that I would have to offer, I don't really know what I would offer, except that I have this unusual hobby of model rocketry, which is a great hobby if you have kids. And so what I've decided to offer is two rockets that I'm putting up for auction separately. People could bid on them, and I'm going to design my own, and we're going to build. I'm going to build them, and then I've also offered to go out and fly them with the winning bidder the first time. Now, a lot of the people here at the school may have never done model rocketry before, so uh, this would be kind of an introductory thing for them. So I'm going to design a really basic rocket. I want something that's going to look, classic, clean, neat design, nothing fancy, nothing. I'm not no multi-stage rockets or anything like that. I want it to be clean and simple, and I want it to look like a model rocket and be pretty standard, and I want it to be attractive. So I'll design it. I will build it. I'm going to build it as nice as I can, cover up all the flaws. I'm going to hide all of the balsa wood grain and all the tube spirals and all that. And, if they want me to, I will go out there and fly it with them. So I want something that's going to be clean and simple. I don't want it to fly too high, because if we take it out and it flies out of sight and we don't see it and then it gets lost, I'm going to feel pretty bad, and feel like I'll have to build them another one. So I set the starting bid at $20, which my wife tells me is pretty low, and that's true, but it's a starting bid. Some of the folks around here are well off, and so I have no idea how much this rocket could go for. 50, 60 bucks, I have no idea. So I'm going to build two of them, and I want to make sure that they get it back. And I want to make sure it looks nice, because they could put this on a shelf or on a desk as a display model, or they could fly it with their kids. I don't know. So I'm usually, when I start with designing a rocket, I usually look at what parts I have on hand, or sometimes I might go shopping. I have a lot of these BT55 nose cones and tubes. BT55 is a very common size for Estes model rockets. The Goblin, if you know the Goblin, that's a very popular Estes model rocket. That's a BT55. The thing about the BT55 that I like is that it's kind of the perfect size. Depending on how you design the rocket, it can look like a small rocket. Or if you make the fins large, you make the body tube nice and long, it can be a nice, impressively sized, larger rocket. And so it's kind of like most of my favorite Estes kits happen to be BT55 sized. And a few years ago, they were discontinuing a rocket called the Photon Probe, and it was a BT55 rocket, and they marked all the kits down to $3. So I bought 30 of them. I think I bought 30 of them because for 30 bucks, for $3 you would get nose cone and tube and parachute and engine tubes and fin stock and all that stuff. And so I bought 30 of them, and I built one of them. I have the parts for the others, but I've also just kept the nose cones and the tubes because I really like this. I like this particular shape of nose cone in particular. So I'm probably going to go with this. Now, what we're going to be using here is OpenRocket. So let me switch to OpenRocket here. So this is OpenRocket. Let me show you where to get this if you don't know. So OpenRocket.info is the website where you would go to download it. It works on Windows, Mac, Linux. It's very simple. It's a very powerful tool. It allows you to design model rockets and then print templates so that you can then build the thing that you've designed. So what we're going to do first is this is going to be a pretty short live stream. I'm just going to design this rocket and then probably run a few test simulations to see what engines or motors would be good with it. I want to keep this real simple. So we're just going to stick with what you would expect for a beginner, which is using Estes engines. Of course, there are other engines, other motors out there by Quest, which could take this rocket much higher, but we're just going to keep it very simple. ABC Estes engines is what we're going to test this out on. So I'm going to start with this particular nose cone because I have a bunch of them. I happen to know the part name of it. So we're going to select it from a drop-down. So when you start with OpenRocket, you now can start with a body tube, but I'm going to start with a nose cone. This pop-up comes up, and this is a lot of the commercially available parts. You can uncheck this box if you get tired of this thing popping up every time you're using it. But I'm actually going to keep it because I'm going to use this Estes nose cone. And this is a BT55. I believe this is a PNC, which means plastic nose cone. PNC 55AO. If you hear voices in the background, that is my son having a play date. So that's what's going on in the background. All right, so we got the BT or the PNC 55AO. It's you can see the it doesn't look exactly like this in the OpenRocket simulation, but that's okay. Mathematically, this matches this. Next, we're going to attach a body tube. And again, we've got BT55 tubes that are just going to pop up. Now, let's see. I'm just going to select an 18-inch body tube. You can buy body tubes at a lot of places, and I do have a video on my channel of where to buy model rocket supplies, not just Amazon. And you can buy not just kits, but you can buy parts if you want. Now, a standard size for body tubes that you buy are 18 inches long. And a real simple thing to do would be to take a nose cone, take an 18-inch body tube, and attach some fins to it. But here's my thinking about this. First of all, I'm going to make 2 rockets, so I can get 2 rockets out of one tube if I cut it down in half. But more importantly, the people who are buying these may not be rocketeers in general. They may be actually just beginners. They may want to keep this on a shelf. 18 inches long of a tube plus a 5-inch nose cone. That's kind of a lot. And so I kind of think I want to make this a little smaller because I want them to be able to put this on a bookshelf and not have to worry about, oh, this is a 2.5-foot rocket, 2-foot tall rocket. Where are we going to put this thing? So I'm going to make this a 9-inch tube. So I have my units here set in inches because I know inches better than I know centimeters. So I'm going to go ahead and make this a 9-inch long body tube. So now we have our nose cone. We have our 9-inch long body tube. Next, we're going to go ahead and attach some fins. So we have some options here. So we can have our trapezoidal fins. That's your 4-sided fins, right? Elliptical fins, freeform, or tube fins. So tube fins, this is interesting. Tube fins are basically, a tube fin rocket has extra bits of body tube as the fins. Whoop, that's not what I meant to do. No, didn't mean to do 4. I meant to do 6. And we're going to make them shorter. And I'll just show you what this kind of looks like here. If we do a finished view, what you've got is you have extra bits of body tube. They fit around the rocket, and 6 tubes will fit perfectly around a tube of the same diameter. So that is tube fins. A lot of people love tube fins, but I want this to look pretty classical. You could go with elliptical. A lot of people like elliptical fins because they are said to have lower induced drag, but of course they are also harder to cut if you're cutting freeform. Cutting freehand, I usually go with trapezoidal fins. Now, when you're designing a model rocket, you need to have at least 3 fins for stability. You could have 2 fins of one shape and then 2 other fins of another shape, or a 3rd fin of another shape. You can have as many up to, I think, 8 fins in OpenRocket. I happen to like 4-fin rockets. That's my favorite. So when the first thing you get is you get these kind of not too attractive looking fins. I mean, this would work, but it's not very nice looking. So I'm going to alter the size of these fins a little bit. So Yeah, so when the standard for, as you can see, for sizes of things in OpenRocket is metric. So it's 50 millimeters root and tip, 30 millimeters high, etc. That's why you have these odd shapes and sizes in inches. I'm going to switch this back to inches because it's what I know best. And I'm going to say the root, let's make the root chord about 2, let's see what, no, 2 inches, and maybe the tip chord 1.25. This is looking a little bit more classic. That's a little dull. So if you look at the top view, this is our top view and our side view. They look identical right now. This is the design view, right? We can also look at the back view. We can look at a 3D figure which has all of the parts, and we don't have any internal parts here yet. And then we could do a finished view, and you can actually turn this around. I could change the colors on these. We'll probably do that a little bit later. I'm going to play around with these fins a little bit here. So let's say 2.5 inch root chord. Let's say 1.5 inches tip chord, and let's say 2 inches tall. Maybe a little taller than that. 2.5 inches tall. Nope. I'm sorry, I'm changing the wrong thing. 1.5 inch tip chord. That's what it is. And height 2 inches tall. There we go. Okay. That's not great, but let's sweep these back a little bit. So let's go with 41 degrees. No, don't change. Okay. 41 degrees. All right, so now we have this rocket that's looking a little bit more, as I said, this is a simple looking rocket, right? One of the things about, now, if I were building a rocket that I wanted to take a hard landing, I might not have the fins swept back because, you know, I'd want to protect the backs of the fins from a hard landing. But, again, these people bidding on this rocket may not be experienced rocketeers. They probably won't be. I want this to be able to just sit on a desk and look nice, so I want the fins swept back so they can just set them right on the fins, like you would do with, say, a Big Bertha. Because if I were building my own rockets, for my old rockets, I would build a stand, but we're not going to do that in this case. All right, so let's say for now that is the exterior part of our rocket. Now I need to put the interior parts. So I'm going to select our body tube, and I'm going to put in an inner tube. Now, I'm just going to close this. It's going to automatically select a tube which is about 18 millimeters in diameter, because a lot of times when you're putting in an internal tube, what you're putting in is an engine mount or motor mount. And that's what we're going to do here. There might be other reasons, other structural reasons you are going to put in an inner tube, but it's going to assume this is probably a motor tube. But in order to make it a motor tube, we have to go from General here to the Motor tab, and we're going to click this is a motor mount, and we want the motor to overhang. We don't want it flush with the bottom of the tube. So I usually do what Estes does and have it stick out about 1/4 inch. Okay. Now this tube right now is flush with the bottom of the parent component, and that is fine, except I think just to make it a little easier to get the motor in and out, I'm going to let it hang over just a little bit. So I'm going to have it stick out about 1/4 inch. So the motor will be about 1/2 inch out of the back of the rocket, because I've got the motor tube sticking out 1/4 inch, and then the motor will be sticking out 1/4 inch of that. And I'm going to put an engine block in there. I'm not going to choose a specific part. I'm going to say this is probably going to be about a 2 millimeter thick tube, and I'm going to negative 2.5 inches. There we go. So that's the engine block. Now, I am going to put in a hook, but there's really no good way for me to simulate a hook in here, so I'm not going to worry about that. Next thing I'm going to do, of course, is add a couple of centering rings. These are probably going to be cardboard or fiberboard, something like that. It's automatically going to assume the correct inner diameter and outer diameter. So I'm going to move one up to close to the front of the engine tube, and then I'm going to duplicate that and move this one back. Oops. Move it back. Negative 0.25. I always get this backwards, which is positive and which is negative. So now I've got two centering rings. I've got my fins. I've got my nose cone. I forgot my launch lug. So I'm going to go ahead and put a launch lug on here. I'm just going to choose an Estes launch lug, a 1 1/4 inch launch lug. The launch lugs I have actually in my bin are actually probably from Semrock. And I'm going to have this at a 45-degree angle so that it's not in line with a fin. If I undo that. Edit, redo, use. Now, let me show you something. If I didn't change that, what would happen is, if you look at the back view, my launch lug is in line with the fin. We can't have that. So we're going to have that at a 45-degree rotation. So there's our launch lug. Okay. And I'm going to have it from the bottom of the parent component. I'm going to have it negative 3.5 inches, right about there. Okay. Right about there. Anywhere between, somewhere close to the center of gravity is fine. There's no hard and fast rule about where to put a launch lug, as long as it's not way down at the bottom or way up at the top. Or you could have two. If you have two, you're pretty much good to go. They can go anywhere. So there we go. So now we need our recovery system. So I'm going to go ahead and select our body tube. I'm going to go down to parachute. I'm going to make a parachute. I'm actually going to make the parachute, and it's probably going to be about a 12-inch diameter parachute, and I'm going to make it out of a used Mylar party balloon, and I am going to do a video on how to do that. It's very easy to do. It saves you money. If you've got a kid like I do who loves balloons, you probably have some leftover dead Mylar balloons, and so I'm going to do that. And I'll just make the shroud lines. We'll say they're going to be 24 inches long. That may not end up being what I will do, but I'm just going to say that that's going to be the case, and I'm going to, it'll pack in a little back here. Finally, I'm going to add a shock cord. I'll probably use some flat elastic for this. 1/2 inch elastic, maybe 1/4 inch elastic. I might actually use an Estes rubber shock cord because I have a bunch of them lying around. I have found that sewing elastic ones need to be replaced after several launches. I've had them just get brittle and snap. But for now, we're just going to say it's an elastic shock cord. I could change that later. So now I have a model rocket. Let's just play around with colors. So if I want to change the appearance of this, and you don't need to do this, but I do this just to sort of like get an idea of maybe a color scheme. So I'm going to make the nose cone black. The cardboard tube, I'm going to make, let's say that'll be a nice red color. And then let's make the fins some kind of yellow color. The thumbnail of this might have used these colors because I think I've used this color scheme before. All right, so if I want to, I can split these fins up and I can make them different colors, whatever. This is just to give me an idea of like, that's a pretty color scheme. I want it to be like nice, bright colors, something kids will like, something decorative, and yeah, that's good. So let's test out our rocket. Now that we have everything kind of designed and we kind of like the way it looks, let's take a look and see what kind of motors we can use in this. So we're going to just test out some Estes motors. So let's try some Estes A motors. We'll try an Estes A83. Okay. And then I'm going to add a new configuration, and I'm going to add an Estes B64. These are just real basic motors, that engines you might find on the side of any Estes kit package. And then we're going to try a C65, Estes C65. And, oh, I did not mean to do that. I didn't mean to change that. I meant to add it. So let's change back to the B64. 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 Okay. Add a new configuration. Estes C65. And because they now have them, we're going to also try out an Estes C5-3, which is a fun motor. It has a lot more kick off the pad than the others. All right, so let's take a look here. So now we've picked out 4 really standard Estes engines. They're 18 millimeters in diameter. So let's go and just run our simulations and see how they're doing. Now, I should say, we've built a simulation here of parts. We have an estimated mass without motors, which is 41.2 grams, but that's an estimation. So the actual rocket, once we build it and paint it, is going to have a different mass. The component, like the fin stock, is probably going to be denser or less dense than the assumed mass here in the simulation. So what we end up with is going to differ here. But this just gives us a really vague, just basic idea of what we might expect from, this rocket design, right? So this is just really basic, no frills design. Now, one thing that I forgot to do when I put on the fins is to determine how thick they are. And I think these are 1/8 of an inch thick. Yeah, and that's a little thicker than I want. I want to go with 3/32 of an inch. I just think it's more appropriate for a rocket of this size. Most Estes fin stock is 3/32 of an inch. Some of the rockets, like a Big Bertha, that's 1/8 of an inch thick. Really high-flying ones are 1/16 of an inch. But let's try this. So now we're going to go back to our flight simulations. We're going to rerun those. And so with our A83, it looks like we can expect 160 feet. Real easy flight for beginners, real easy flight for kids. And we have an optimum delay of about 2.74 seconds, so that I picked the right delay for that. 361 feet with the B engine. The C65 is about 697 feet. Again, these are approximations. And 637 feet for the C5-3. And it looks like our delays, if you look here, right here, these, we picked these pretty good. So this is a very standard looking, very basic looking model rocket that should perform well with any of these engines. So when I take my winning bidders out for their first flight, I'll probably take some B engines because I want to, give them a fun flight. A's are pretty low flying flights. But, I don't want to get anything caught in a tree. If it goes over 700 feet and it's a windy day, we got a lot of parks around here. We got a lot of trees around here. I don't want to risk getting this rocket caught in a tree on its first flight. So I think for the first flight, I'm going to take out some B64s and fly this rocket, have a fun time, get it back. You can see we have a nice, slow, less than 10 miles an hour ground hit speed. Once we have our parachute come out, I think this is great. So that was real basic, real simple, nothing fancy, using parts that I have. I'm going to build these rockets, and I think I'm going to go with something like this. I might play around with this design a little bit, but this is a design I quite like. I think it looks nice. And again, it's very simple. It's not too large. It's not going to fly too high. It's going to look good on a desk or a bookshelf. And I think for people who've maybe never done this before with their kids, who are bidding on a model rocket, they want something, I want to give them something that looks nice and that will fly well. And I think this is a really nice, real basic design, right? Nothing fancy. I've designed, other rockets that are like multi-stage and have, funky looking fins or payload sections, all that stuff. And that's great. But this is really for a fundraiser for people who've probably never done this before. So I think this will be a great introductory rocket. And I keep a lookout on this channel. I am intending to do a build video of this rocket or whatever I end up with if I play with this rocket a little bit, tinker around with it. But I think that's what we're going to go for. BT-55. I got the great plastic nose cone. I got the 9-inch tube. I can get 2 rockets out of this and some nice swept back fins that look really classic and really basic. So if you like this video, this live stream, hit the subscribe and the the like buttons. And as always, build well, fly safe, and I'll catch you next time.